Hi, this is William from Great Affordable Watches, and today I'm gonna take a look at a new watch from a new microbrand company called Nodus, and their first watch, the Nodus Trieste. So I saw a forum post a while ago about this watch, and I found the design and the specifications very interesting, and they offered it for a reasonable price. So I reached out to Nodus and asked them if they could send me a review unit for me to review, and they were kind enough to do that. So today I'm gonna take a closer look at the watch and see if it lives up to the expectations. So let's switch perspective and take a closer look at the watch. Talk a bit about the company first. The company is owned by two guys from Los Angeles, and the company itself is also based in Los Angeles. This watch, the Trieste, is Nodus' first watch, and Trieste is named after the famous 1960 Trieste submersible expedition down to the Mariana Trench, and Mariana Trench is the deepest place on Earth, so I think the name is very fitting actually, and I really like it. The watches are made in China, but most microbrand watches are made in China, and a Chinese made watch is not bad or anything wrong. I think the most important part is the quality control, and the quality control is done in Los Angeles by Nodus themselves. The movement is also regulated in 4 positions, so I think that's excellent, and from what I've seen, the quality control is the most important part, and not where it's made. Okay, let's go through some specifications. The case size of this watch is 41 millimeters in diameter. The lug to lug length is 50 millimeters, and the lug width is 20 millimeters. It's around 13 millimeters thick. It got sapphire crystal on the front, a sapphire crystal bezel insert, and a solid case back with some engraving. It also got a screw down crown that is signed, and 200 meter water resistant, or 20 ATM. This watch comes in a variety of versions, and this is of course the red bezel insert, but it also comes in 2 different movements. First, the Seiko NH35, which is a great Seiko movement, and a version with the Swiss-made SDP 111. The Seiko version, the Seiko movement version, retails for $350, and the one with the Swiss-made SDP 111 retails for about $500. SDP is owned by Fossil, and the SDP 111 is a ETA 2824 clone, but I read some reports that some people think that the SDP 111 is a better version of the ETA 2824 because it's a newer design and made with better, more high precision. I'm gonna leave a link down in the description for an article about the movement, but in my opinion I think it's a great movement. The case is very nicely finished with brushing on the top of the lugs, brushed sides, and a very good looking chamfered edge here, and I think it's a nice contrast between the brushed lugs and the brushed sides. I think that looks really good, and I always like a bit of finishing on the case, so it's very nice to see on a microbrand as well. And as we can see, the crown, it got no crown guards, which is in my opinion very good looking. Really like watches with no crown guards, but that's of course a matter of opinion. It also got a solid case back. It's one of the things I like the least on this watch. I think the case back is decent at most, and I think the engraving is also decent, but it's nothing special or spectacular. It's decent looking, and as we can see, it's a bit scratched up, but this is of course a review unit, so that is to be expected. Overall, I think the case is very nicely done and nicely finished, and it feels very robust and solid in general. When it comes to the dial, I think it's very nicely made as well, and I really like the sapphire bezel around the dial, and I think it's nice to see a sapphire crystal instead of a ceramic or aluminium that we usually see. And I like that the bezel insert, the bezel in general, is a bit thinner than I'm used to, at least on the diving watches. And the dial is also very nicely done, and I really like the hands. I think the hands are really unique, and I've not seen this type of hands before, so that's a really nice touch. And the dial is very minimalistic and simple, which is also a nice thing in my opinion. The only thing I'm a bit skeptical about is the very small round markers. I think the round markers between 12, 3, 6 and 9 o'clock is a bit smaller than I'm used to. A price you have to pay for that is that you can fit less lume on the markers, so the lume will suffer a bit. But I think the dial overall is nicely executed, and it's very simple. And I think the overall watch is a bit vintage inspired, inspired by some skin divers from the 60s and 70s. And also I can see a hint of Blancpain bath escape. I don't think it's a homage or a copy to that watch, but I can see some hints of that watch. And I think the bath escape is a really good looking watch, and so I think this watch is also very good looking. And I think that the yellow Trieste here is a nice contrasting on the otherwise very simple dial. And as I said, this I think it's a vintage inspired watch, but to a modern standard, and I think it looks very modern but takes some inspiration from the 60s and 70s divers. This is of course a preference, but I really like the look of this watch. Overall, I think the watch is very nicely executed. I'm honestly really surprised how well made it feels and how solid it feels, and there's nothing I don't like about the watch except for the case back, which is decent, and as I'm gonna talk a bit about later, the bracelet. But other than that, I think it's a very good value for your money. You got very good value for your money. You got a nice Swiss made movement, nice finishing on the case, a nicely done dial, and I think the watch in general is pretty unique, and overall I think it's a great package. But as I said, the bracelet is the weak point of this watch, and it comes with solid end links and solid links, and that's decent, but buckle and the clasp doesn't feel that great, honestly. I think it feels pretty cheap, and especially the buckle here, it feels very, very cheap. But luckily I'm not a bracelet type of person, so I just switched it to a Sailcloth strap from Mr. Sailcloth, and I really like these straps. But if you like bracelets and you want a solid bracelet, I think you gotta think twice, because the bracelet is the weakest part of the watch. It's not the worst bracelet, and the links themselves are pretty decent, pretty good, but the clasp is pretty bad, honestly. Other than that, I think it's a very nice watch, as I said, and if you're looking for a vintage inspired watch but a bit more modern feeling, a modern look, I think this is a very nice choice. And for the price, I think you can't really go wrong. Great specs and all, as I said, and I'm surprised that the first watch from Nodus is this good, and if they keep doing this, I'm sure they will be very popular in the watch community. And of course I'm gonna do a lume shot and also a wrist shot. Okay, here it is, and I think it sits very nicely on my 7-inch wrist. It do wear a bit large. I think it's thanks to the pretty long lug length of 50 millimeters. but it's not that thick. It's only 30 millimeters, so it doesn't wear that tall. But this is not a small watch, and even though it's only 41 millimeters, I think it wears more like a 42 or maybe even a 43. So if you like smaller watches, this is probably not for you, but I think it's a very good size anyway, and it doesn't feel or fit too big on my 7-inch wrist. I think overall this looks very good, and I really like the red bezel and the little yellow text on the dial, and it adds to the overall feeling of it. I'm used to smaller watches, but after wearing it for a while I think it's very comfortable, and even though it wears a bit larger than a 41mm usually do, I still doesn't think it's too big, and I think it's a pretty standard size for watches these days. But the sizes are going down, and I hope they will offer a 39mm version of this watch or 40mm version of this watch in the future. I think that would be the sweet spot for me at least, but I guess most people will find this size very nice. So overall I can highly recommend this watch if you can get over the fact that the bracelet is decent at best and probably below decent. We should note that the links themselves are pretty good, and if they were to change the clasp, I think the overall bracelet will feel much more solid. So if you like this review, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel, and I hope I see you in the next one. Bye.